Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Edric Show. I am your host, Edric Jerome. This is the place for intelligent conversation with interesting people. Go ahead and hit that subscribe button and ring that notification bell, and you'll get notified of the interesting content I post each and every week. My guest today is Dr. Beth Kurland. She's the author of the new book, You Don't Have to Change Everything: 6 Ways to Shift Your Vantage Point. Stop striving for happy and find true well-being. Dr. Kurland is a clinical psychologist with more than 25 years of experience, and she's the author of 3 previous books on mindfulness, stress reduction, and well-being. Beth, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
My
Excited.
pleasure. My pleasure. So let's get into it. So first of
Okay.
all, I want to start out because your book explores a new perspective on the concept of being happy. What are some of the benefits of thinking about happiness in a new way?
Well, I think that, this book, I wrote a lot of this book during the pandemic. So just to put a little context around it. And one of the things that really struck me at that time was that I noticed for myself, as well as, a lot of the people I were working with and most of the people around me, we weren't feeling particularly happy, especially in those early days. There was a lot of fear and uncertainty and worry and all of that. But what I noticed was that even when happiness wasn't present, well-being could be found. And there were ways that, kind of helped to find that well-being. And so I make this distinction in the book between happiness and well-being. And happiness, I'm really referring to more of that hedonic happiness that is in, like, at least the American culture in the Northeast here where I grew up, which is a lot of that seeking pleasure, that kind of thing. And just to put out right out, happiness is wonderful. I hope we all feel it as much as possible. But the I guess what really came to me was what do we do when we're not feeling happy? That happiness, that hedonic happiness is fleeting. It comes, it goes. It's often dependent on circumstance. When something happens, that I'm happy. It depends on our mood. And so kind of this whole premise of how do we build a deeper well of well-being that can support us no matter what we're feeling and through the ups and downs of life, which I know for so many people, especially these past years, for lots of reasons, has been very bumpy.
That's a great segue to my next question because I was going to ask you, we all have to deal with difficult emotions, challenging situations. But in your experience, how do people typically deal with those types of emotions versus some of the new ways or a different way to approach those emotions that you specify in your book?
Yeah, so I think we are biologically wired and often culturally, socially conditioned to respond kind of on one or other side of things here. But one is when we come up against those more unpleasant emotions, we tend to push away, suppress, ignore, sometimes, kind of fight against them to try to get rid of them. The other way that we can swing sometimes is getting caught up in the emotions, getting kind of gripped by anxiety or anger or fear or, irritation or whatever. And, I've certainly been on both ends a lot. It's part of our human condition. But what I was really trying to do in the book was share a different path forward, where we're neither pushing away and fighting against, but we're also not getting swallowed up in what's there. But kind of how do we relate to these emotions in a way that gives us a little bit more space, a little bit more choice, a little bit more ease in terms of navigating and moving forward.
You talk about survival wiring versus thriving wiring. Can you discuss that concept a little bit?
Okay, so yeah, actually, I think I'm going to do this just with a quick example or
Sure, sure.
ask you and the listeners to kind of think of their own experience of this. But if you think about, could be a typical stressor in your week. It could be something like, you know, being stuck in traffic and being late for a meeting. I mean, I don't want anybody to pick anything too intense here, but just kind of your typical day-to-day sort of thing, stuck in traffic, late for an important appointment. A big one for me, technological issues, computer crashes, things like that. Maybe this is one appropriate for this timing, having to do one's taxes. Right?
Absolutely.
So just kind of noticing like when you think about something that you might consider stressful, what happens in the body, and what you notice. A lot of people, there's tightening, there's a little constriction of the breathing, the muscles tense up. There can be sometimes, if it's something that's more like we want to avoid it, it could be like, oh God, kind of shut down, like procrastinate. I don't want to approach this thing. It feels overwhelming. So that represents our survival wiring, that we are wired when we perceive threats. And in this case, I use that really talking about things that the nervous system perceives as like, this is difficult. So again, just even some of those common stressors that we face day to day. Our nervous system is wired through evolution, helped our Stone Age ancestors survive to have this fight or flight response. We can, be prepared. Our body revs up resources to either fight the saber-toothed tiger or to run away, or sometimes to go into shutdown mode, kind of playing dead back in whatever animals playing dead in the wild to protect. So these are all forms of protection. That is all part of our survival wiring. It's very normal, adaptive. We experience it in different, small ways throughout our week and life. And we also, though, have thriving wiring. So if you think about, or kind of, again, inviting the listeners just to pause for a moment and maybe call up a time when you're in a beautiful place in nature and you just feel this interconnection with the natural world around you, maybe serenity, sense of peace, or maybe calling to mind being in the presence of somebody that you really care about deeply, and just noticing what happens in the body when you call that to mind.
Mm.
And for many people, there's a different shift that happens compared to that first one, that there's more ease, the body kind of calms, there's more relaxation available, or even just kind of dialing down our stress response. And from that place, when our thriving wiring, our social engagement circuitry is turned on, we have access to feeling more connected with other people. We can see a bigger picture. We can see things from a wider perspective. We can think more clearly. Sometimes, problem solve better. We have access to more creativity. We have access to more compassion and self-compassion. And so we have all of these resources, our survival resources, protection resources, and our thriving connection resources that are available. Sometimes, and I speak for myself, it's been easy in my lifetime to get stuck in the survival wiring. And I tend to be wired anxious. I tend to be wired high stress. So really having ways of understanding what's happening inside and being able to access more of those thriving circuits that are already here, but take a little bit of practice sometimes for us to really engage. And when we do, then we deepen that well of well-being. We really begin to strengthen the well-being that can support us through whatever challenges we might be facing.
Yeah, that raises another question, because I think, at least for me, oftentimes I disassociate a mental challenge or a mental stressor and a physical stressor. But based in the way you answer the question, they're related. Your nervous system and your emotions, they're all connected. And I think sometimes, at least I'm guilty of maybe not focusing on that connection.
Yeah, I think we don't usually think so much about what's happening underneath here,
Right.
in the body and in the nervous system. And I do spend a little bit of time in the book trying to explain that, because I think it's empowering. I think when we can understand, it's a little bit like understanding. Sorry, I'm just going to turn this light away.
Sure.
It's a little bit like understanding how our car works. If we didn't understand how a car works and we're maybe, my son did this, there's a little story in the book, driving with his emergency brake engaged for a little while down the road, you're going to get a pretty jerky ride. Or if you got your foot, the accelerator is pressed down at 60 miles an hour and you can't slow the car down, right? That's going to not be such a comfortable ride. But if you understand how to use both in tandem, then it creates this smoother ride. And so I kind of think of the understanding our nervous system in a similar way, that when we do, we can figure out what we need to bring more ease. Yeah.
You mentioned your son, and one of the things I wanted to ask you about is you share very personal stories of dealing with the trauma that you faced in your life and the emotional challenges that you faced in your life based on what's happened to you over the years. Um, how has sharing your story helped you,
Mhm.
and how has it helped you in your journey towards well-being?
That's a great question. I think that for me, writing has always been kind of a therapeutic modality. When I was very little, well, I guess about when I was 6, I started writing poetry, and I would kind of stuff them in this bag, this huge bag filled with, and it was, for me, that was a way of really just putting words to my experience. And then in later years, more of the writing for me. So having the opportunity, and it wasn't a conscious, like, I'm going to sit down and write this book and tell my story. That wasn't how it evolved. It evolved by doing these writing workshops where we'd be given a prompt and just these pieces would emerge, kind of emerge from somewhere within, where it was not a conscious, um, you know, I'm going to think about writing X, but very fascinating process. But in that process, there was something really therapeutic, I think, about being able to, for myself, put it on the page and piece it together and see kind of how the story connects. And then, I feel really grateful to have the opportunity to share it with people, because I think so many people feel like, we go through this life feeling like I'm alone, like I'm the only one feeling this, or there must be something wrong with me that I'm feeling this. So yeah, I did end up sharing quite a bit, I guess, of my own personal story in there, in the hopes that it will be helpful to others in some way, shape, or form. And it's
Um, Sure. You mentioned the pandemic and what a lot of folks went through, and one of the things I appreciated about your book is that it it can be used across generations, from younger people and teens and older folks. Talk to me about the generalization aspect of your book, and how people of all walks of life can use it.
Hmm. Yeah, so I tried to make it both. It's kind of got the psychology, a little bit of the neuroscience in there, for explanation, but also tried to add a lot of practical, um, hands-on kinds of practices, questions for reflection, meditations that people can try or even, listen to. I created, there's a way to access the audios of those. So my hope was that there's something for everybody, I guess, in that. And I think that this book, at least my experience of it, is it's kind of like, there's different layers. And I think that different people of different generations will get maybe different things out of it, or different messages that they can, walk away with. So, and because I also think it really speaks to, or my hope was that it speaks to our common humanity that we all share, which includes, these difficult emotions that as human beings we all struggle with, whether we're 15 or 25 or 85. So there's this shared lived experience of what's happening internally that really happens across life.
There are literally thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of self-help books out there. What makes yours unique? And I do think it is unique, the approach to finding well-being. What makes yours unique as compared to maybe some of the other books out there?
So I guess one of the things that I tried to do at the outset was to focus on this message that I think that there are a lot of self-help books. First of all, there's many wonderful ones out there. In my experience, many of them focus a little bit on a message of gotta kind of fix ourselves,
Right.
change ourselves, improve ourselves, be some new, better, improved version of who I am. And I wanted to turn that around on its head a little bit. And thus the title of the book, You Don't Have to Change Everything. And really starting with the framework that there isn't anything wrong with us. There isn't anything that, needs to be fixed, but it's just about understanding and kind of when we can learn how we can shift our vantage point and look at things from different perspectives and relate to our inner emotions from different places. Natural well-being begins to emerge from that place. And part of that natural well-being connects back to that thriving wiring, that when our nervous system feels, is in a state of more balance, we naturally have access to a lot of inner resources that we may not even realize a lot of the time.
Well, Beth, I want to thank you so much for coming on the show today. Your book is refreshing in its approach. I think it's a new way of helping people who might be going through things. That's why I asked a question about
Mhm.
the difference between your book and the books that are out there currently. If people want more information about you or about how they can get the book, where can they go?
Yeah, so they can go to my website, which is bethkurland.com, BETHKURLAND.com. And there's lots of different resources on there, information about the book. The book's out in different Amazon, Barnes and Noble, any of those kind of places. And I also have an Instagram, Dr. Oh my gosh, I can't remember my
I'll
handle.
have it on the crawl below. I'll find it.
Yeah, so people can follow me on Instagram as well. I try to post little, practical tools for well-being on there. Yeah, and I love to hear from people. And so, there's a place to contact me if people have questions or whatnot. Yeah.
Excellent. Excellent. Well, Dr. Kurland, thank you so much for coming on the Edge Show. I really appreciate your time today.
Well, thank you so much for having me. It was a pleasure.
You're very welcome. My guest has been Dr. Beth Kurland. She's the author of the brand new book, You Don't Have to Change Everything: 6 Ways to Shift Your Vantage Point, Stop Striving for Happy, and Find True Well-Being. The book is available on Amazon and everywhere right now. So again, Dr. Kurland, thank you.
Thank you.
This has been another edition of the Edric Show. I am your host, Edric Jerome. As I say always, this is the place for intelligent conversation with interesting people. Go ahead and hit that subscribe button, ring that notification bell, and you will get notified of this content each and every week. I want to thank you for tuning in, and I will catch you on the next episode.